All right, we are going to talk about transfers. That seems to be the topic. All right, so the first question, which kind of really just talks about, barriers. What are some things that are getting in the way? Um, yeah, I think that it would be remiss if we didn't talk about the acceptance of credit. Making sure that classes are transferring and courses are transferring, and there's certainly a lot that can be done about that. Um, but uh, sorry. But I think that there's some other, I think, bigger things to look at. I think that one, you have just the type of student that is transferring. Is one that research shows is kind of they're up against the wall already. Almost from the get-go, they're starting further behind. They don't really have that high school success. They typically perform lower on any sort of testing. They're coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They're coming from families where they're probably the first one in their family to go to college. And so all of these indications, they're most likely a minority. So all these things indicate someone who's already starting behind, and so that's a barrier that they face in community college in general, much less trying to transfer. But there's certainly some other things going on. Um, Articulation agreements that are not that are just inconsistent when you go from state to state, I think is a barrier for everyone, because it's going to be it's difficult for some students to transfer over. Uh, Particularly at universities where they take in a lot of transfer students, there isn't always I guess just a culture of how to take care of those students. And so yes, like you're at a university that you can transfer into, but they don't really know all of the things that you have going on, because you're not a first time in college student, and so a lot of their programs that they have in place may be set up for your typical native um, first year student who is a freshman, and maybe not your transfer student who's a junior. And so colleges just aren't really, not all universities are prepared for that. It's also extremely hard financially to go from paying for a community college to paying for a four-year university. The students who typically your transfer students who are balancing work and potentially family. This isn't the same. It's not the same as your native students who are kind of more just looking at school as their full-time job. And so there are definitely those barriers in the way. The second question talks about institutional and state policies that can change. Um, statewide articulation agreements are something that is necessary. Um, you have states like Texas, which has a common course numbering. It utilizes kind of your basic core packages that can transfer, but not a lot of states have that, and so not all states have that, at least. And so making sure that you can get to a point where they're more statewide, from a statewide policy, that kind of articulation agreement is necessary. I think there needs to be better at institutions, community colleges. I think there needs to be better support for part-time students. A lot of the students are part-time, and it's really difficult for them to feel like they're a part of it. Already it's difficult to feel like you're a part of it because you're at community college. The academic preparation, um, and that's difficult to try to say that, oh, that needs to change from an institutional or a state level, but that's something that's getting in the way. But if anything, maybe you know, the community colleges that really focus on, all right, take courses that are in line with what you're doing, with what you're studying, with what your major is, with what your transfer major is going to be. Those schools end up doing better. Institutions also need to do a better job with the financial aid, just with information, making sure that students know how they are going to pay for community college, but also, okay, when they get to that four-year university and those fees go up and that enrollment, that tuition goes up, how are they going to pay for that? Better information needs to get there. Um, I'd see another great thing that would be in what we saw from like Valencia College in Florida, which has a direct connect transfer program with the University of Central Florida, has a counselor from Central Florida at the community college, and so it's specifically to say, all right, this is where you are, this is where you need to be to transfer to Central Florida. The final question talks about, do you believe community colleges are a viable pathway? I think it's yes and no. I think from the yes standpoint, There are states that and community colleges that are successful, yeah, and they do a great job with underserved populations. It's a great way for someone to go from a lower socioeconomic status to get into a community college, to take their courses, transfer to a four-year university, do it at less expense, um, and benefit their family for generations to come. So so that their children don't have to be the first ones from their family to go to college. They've already done that. Um, yeah, I think one thing that needs to happen, um, is that faculty from the community college and from universities need to come together. The Cohen Brower book talks about how that's one of the biggest issues, is that when they talk about getting courses to transfer and getting course content to be consistent, it's student affairs people who are doing the bulk of the work because faculty aren't coming together. That's who needs to decide, take a look at classes and say, this is important, this is important, these are the things that need to be taught in this class. Um, but I go yes and no, because while I know that it's a great way to go in, get inexpensive classes knocked out of the way, and great way to you can transfer and still get you know it's difficult for me to say, but I'm not every student, and you're definitely not your typical student that goes to a community college, and so my knowledge of what's available and what's out there um, isn't the same as your typical community college student. And so I think that the answer might be no, when it comes to is it a viable pathway, because of that lack of information, because there are so many community college students who don't know what is actually available to them, what programs are at their community college, what ways they can already be set up to transfer. So sorry I can't give you an answer.